Hello and welcome back. In this chapter we are going to talk about Domain Name System, or DNS for short. DNS is an automated naming system that facilitates conversion of easy-to-remember alphanumeric domain names to a series of numbers, as in IPv4, or numbers and letters, as in IPv6, IP addresses. The idea behind DNS was to simplify and automate the manual work of updating a centralized host table that in the old days could be only updated via the phone during business hours. DNS can handle domain names and various types of records like A or MX records. If we simplify a little, we can say that the structure of DNS servers on the internet consists of various DNS servers, such as those that ISPs have, and root servers at the core that are responsible to give you a list of authoritative name servers for the appropriate top-level domain. If your DNS server doesn't have a record, then it would forward the query to the root server that will point you to the right authoritative server that should have all records for that domain. Microsoft's definition of DNS is Domain Name System. DNS is one of the industry standard suites of protocols that comprise TCP/IP, and together the DNS client and DNS server provide computer name to IP address mapping name resolution services to computers and users. We have already added the DNS server role on our DC during Active Directory Domain Services installation. Active Directory requires a DNS server to function properly. Let's take a look at the DNS Management Console. Go to Start menu. Type DNS and launch the DNS Manager snap-in. From this console you manage your DNS server settings as well as DNS records. The top level indicates the name of the DNS server itself. Let's explore the server's settings first. Right-click and go to Properties. The first tab shows Interfaces. These settings are responsible for binding interfaces to the DNS server. By default, all interfaces will accept and resolve DNS queries. Forwarders help to speed up the resolution process for DNS queries by sending queries not to the root servers, but to third-party servers, like Google or Cloudflare, which advertises itself as the fastest DNS server on the internet. We already have one entry, which is Google DNS. Let's add one more. Click the Edit button and enter the IP address of another Google DNS server. We will use 8.8.4.4 IP. Also, you can see OK in the validated column for our first DNS entry. That means our forwarding server is operational and was able to resolve a test query. By the way, the process of resolving an IP address to an FQDN is called reverse lookup. I will talk more about it later. At the bottom you see the number of seconds before forward queries timeout setting. I normally leave it as default, 3 seconds. This specifies how long your server will wait for a response from one forwarder before it tries the next forwarder in the list. If you set the setting to 1 second, for example, and the network connection to the server has a higher than 1 second delay, then the query may expire before arriving back to the server and the result will be effectively dismissed. That is why you should not set it too low. Click on the Advanced tab. On this tab you can see the DNS server version number and advanced options. Towards the bottom of this tab, you can see Enable Automatic Scavenging of Stale Records checkbox. Let's briefly talk about what scavenging in DNS is. Scavenging is a process of deleting stale DNS records that are no longer in use. This function is useful to keep the DNS database maintained and helps to avoid potential connectivity issues. This is useful because in Active Directory environment computers automatically create and update their DNS records to facilitate seamless connectivity inside a domain. In contradiction, in the early days the records were created and maintained manually and had to be updated every time an IP address changed. This setting will enable scavenging function on this particular server, but actually won't start deleting any DNS records. To enable scavenging of stale records fully, additional setup is required. You have to configure aging in the zone properties, but this is a more advanced setup and will not be covered here. The rest of the options we can leave as is and they will work fine for a regular environment. In case you want to know more, please research them. In case you experiment with settings and mess up, you can use the button at the bottom to reset everything to its default settings. Click on the Root Hints tab. In this tab you can see the default setting for the DNS root servers. According to the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, the authoritative name servers that serve the DNS root zone, commonly known as the root servers, are a network of hundreds of servers in many countries around the world. They are configured in the DNS root zone as 13 named authorities. They are named in the form letter.root-servers.net, where the letter goes from A to M. Theoretically, you can use your own list of servers for the root hint servers. I will keep the default settings since we are using forwarders instead. Click on the Security tab. This tab is standard Microsoft Windows security settings. You can define who can access the DNS servers here and with what permissions. Click on the Monitoring tab. Here you can set up automated DNS testing on your server. Let's do that. Check all 3 checkboxes if you want to perform automatic testing as well, and then click Test Now button. For whatever reason, the recursive query test failed on the first attempt, but it was successful after that. Click on the Event Logging tab. This tab is used to adjust the logging settings of our DNS server. I keep default settings to log all events because if any issues arise, it is better to have all available logs for the troubleshooting rather than having less logs. Click on the Debug Logging tab. This tab is used to enable advanced packet logging. This is needed in case if serious problems occur and advanced troubleshooting is required. It is recommended to keep it off during normal operation since it will reduce the performance of the DNS server. We have checked DNS server settings that are available in this management console. In the next video we will go over the most common types of DNS records. Thank you and see you in the next video.